Welcome back, Soulmates. Let's get to your headlines. Target company leaders say they'll spend more than $2 billion on Black-owned businesses by 2025 as part of its effort to advance racial equity. The company says it's a significant increase in overall spending on Black-owned businesses, although they didn't release specifics. We're told that Minneapolis retailer will add a wide range of products from more than 500 Black-owned businesses and will increase its spending at more Black-owned companies from marketing to construction. It will also introduce new resources, like a dedicated team to help Black-owned suppliers scale their business to work with mass chains. You've likely noticed corporations have been expanding ties with Black-owned suppliers, rethinking marketing and embracing other initiatives in the aftermath of George Floyd's death and following protests. And as you know, I always say, I want them to also put a big focus on hiring within their own company, not only hiring, pay equity, and also advancement for Black employees. You got, if you look around your executives, you look around that table and nobody's Black, like, it's a problem. Come on.
I agree. We can't grow from that situation. And look, Target Corporation in Minneapolis, of course, they have the Target Center there. This is a good look for Target, like what they're doing. But Brooke, you hit it right there. You said, if we're going to do it, let's do it the right way on every level possible.
Well, if I can say one thing too, starting in February, they actually have a new section inside of Target that's just Black owned, you know, all Black, everything. Go check it out. You know, shirts, sweaters, everything. So there's a whole little Black section that they added inside of Target. I thought it was going to be just Black History Month, but it stayed around. So go check that out.
Whole section to Target.
Whole section to ourselves.
An Illinois man who live streamed his riot trip to Minneapolis last summer, including filming parts of his role in burning down a Sprint store, pleaded guilty in Minnesota U.S. District Court on Wednesday to one count of aiding and abetting arson, according to the Star Tribune. Matthew Rupert of Galesburg, Illinois, was the first person to be charged with federal crimes for participating in the looting and arson that took place after the death of George Floyd. He originally was charged with counts of civil disorder and riot as well, but the U.S. Attorney's Office dropped everything but the arson charge as part of a plea agreement. Rupert faces a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years in prison, and prosecutors are asking U.S. District Judge Nancy Brazel for 7 years and 6 months to 9 years and 6 months. He also could be fined up to $250,000 in order to pay restitution. Sentencing has not been scheduled yet. Rupert has been held in the Sherburne County Jail for 10 months. Look, if you do the crime, you got to do some time. We do understand that, right? But I understand what they're doing in this situation, but let's go back to January the 6th as well. Let's make sure we get those people, right, that disrespected this country did that day, and they should pay as well.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Point. You know, this takes me back to Ferguson, right? So right outside of the area where you're from, right? And so I know those protests hit home close, right? There are so many Ferguson protesters still in prison, right? Or there's definitely one still in prison for a very long time, and some others who have these criminal records now.
That they have to take with them.
Right, and then that I also think about that when we think about what happened after January 6th, and a lot of these people are now facing time. But you know, we then every day we see different things like, oh, she's allowed to go on vacation in Mexico. She's, you know, and it is hard to watch. Yeah,
it is. All right, guys, moving right along. Justice for George Floyd opens up many conversations on race and relations, from policing in communities to color to systemic racism throughout government, corporate America, and even neighbor to neighbor. So here's Fox Chicago's Voices of Change with an important discussion on race and racism.
Terrence Lee with the Voice of Change. Talking about race is not easy, but with the George Floyd trial going on now and the Stop the Asian Hate movement going on right now too, concerns of racism and its impacts keep bubbling to the surface of our national conversation. So how do we have those discussions? A new podcast is leading by example. It's called I Hear Ya, and the co-hosts are joining me now. We say good morning to Pastors Odell Cleveland and Alex McFarland. How you doing, fellas?
Morning, how are you?
Great, good morning.
Good, good. It's good to have you both. I want to start with, what was the conversation like that started all of this? I know you two are friends who decided to start this podcast. Why now?
Well, you know, Derek, first thing, thank you for having us on. But it's interesting, when I first met Alex through a mutual friend, first thing he asked us while we were sitting in Panera Bread having coffee was, do you think I'm a racist? And that started the conversation.
So each episode title is a question. Odell, you chose the first one, and it's Why Do I Frighten People? Why did you feel that was the right way to start this podcast off?
Well, a lot of times, as a large black man, about 6'3", 200 and some odd pounds, you know, sometimes when I get in the elevator, people seem somewhat afraid. And when you deal with that, it's just a constant, and this you deal with it. And when you get in there, especially with white females at times, people seem to be withdrawn. It was one instance when I was the keynote speaker at a national event, and people were coming to see me, but at the same time, when I got in the elevator, even though they were coming to see me, it seemed like they were, you know, concerned that they were in the elevator with me. So it's just interesting when you start dealing with that. You know, you talked about the whole George Floyd thing, and that's kind of the stuff that we talk about. We talk about who's on trial here. When we start talking about race in America, is it George on trial? Is it Derek on trial, or is it America on trial? Are we looking at ourselves as a reflection to see how do we handle this? How do we talk about it? How do we talk about it among friends, one white, one black? And how do we talk about it respectfully, or do we wish it's just going to go away?
Yeah.
Because the key to it is we have to talk about it because it's there. And I thank God for my good friend Alex. And we talk about stuff like that in a very respectful way, but a true way.
Yeah, Alex, I wanted to bring you in here because you chose this question for the second episode. Am I a racist? You both share some very personal stories. What kind of feedback have you gotten from that episode?
Well, again, let me say thanks for having us on. And the feedback has been very positive. I mean, people all across the country and even internationally have emailed us and said that they enjoy listening to us. And, it's serious, sometimes it's kind of funny. But one of the reasons that I kind of threw that question at Odell was I was on a show out of San Francisco, and the topic was immigration. And, I was just talking about responsible immigration policies that look after the interests of American citizens. And I got some email from people saying, okay, you're from the South, you have this Southern accent, you're a white conservative, you're probably a closet KKK racist. I mean, just, crazy stuff like that. So Odell and I, when we got to know each other well over a year ago, I said, listen, let's just be very transparent. Do I come off as a racist? Because God knows I'm not. And we just decided as adult men, mature adults, but also as Christians, John 13, Jesus said, by this will all men know you're my disciples if you love one another. And we just thought for our own benefit, and maybe as an example to others, we would just
Your audio is breaking up a little bit there, Pastor McFarland. Don't mean to cut you off, but people can definitely learn a lot from just listening to you both have these conversations with the goal of ending bias and prejudice and racism. Pastors Odell Cleveland and Alex McFarland. The podcast is called I Hear Ya, and you can get it available wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for joining us this morning, fellas.